Hello and welcome to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. I'm your host Leo, and this week we are talking about Mass Effect. Now, I do know that I did already talk about Mass Effect on the challenge on RPG Hangout, but I did say when I announced the challenge that some of the episodes that I do for the challenge will become mainline episodes, because that's going to be kind of the only way I'm going to be able to talk about games on here for about the next year, is if there's going to be some crossover. But, I'm not going to be lazy. I'm not going to just take the episode that I did there and copy it over. In fact, since I did that episode, I have looked into some things like my PS3 version of the game to give you guys some more stuff to hear. But yeah, so I'm going to go mostly into a lot of the things that I didn't do, a lot of the things that I like a lot more of the choices I made while playing the game. I'll also dip a bit into the story, but it won't be quite as much of a focus on this episode, because if you really want to hear me go into length about the story, feel free to just check out the RPG Hangout episode. It's over there. But I will, touch upon it here and there. Then, and technically first, I do want to talk about my first attempt at playing Mass Effect. Kind of the history section and whatnot. I talked about it a little bit during the RPG Hangout episode, but at the time I hadn't actually gone back and double-checked to see exactly where I was and what I was doing. I have now, and I actually kind of came out of it with more questions than I had answers. So I went into it because like I said in the RPG Hangout episode, I played it a long time ago on my PS3. I got the Mass Effect Trilogy bundle, and I was very excited to play it, but I kind of held off a bit, playing it in bits and pieces, as I do. And eventually I stopped. And then the version for PS4 came out, the Legendary Edition, and I started playing it. That's going to be the one that we're talking about, of course. It's the same game, except for like some minor improvements here and there in whatnot. So, overall, it's fine. We'll go ahead and go through it. But yeah, so with the PS3 version, I booted it up recently just to take a look and see where I was, what I was doing. Because I was pretty sure that I had seen like the penultimate world before. And I was like, okay, weird. So I loaded up my PS3 game, and yeah, I was right there. So in the PS3 game, I had just talked down Rex, and we were getting ready to storm the research facility. And that's exactly where I stopped. I decided to check how long it had taken me to get to that point. And it was about 39 hours. And I was shocked. I was like, what? Why did it take 39 hours for me to get to this point? And the answer is, I don't fully know. I have a theory, but I don't fully know, because I looked through the missions and whatnot, and I hadn't actually done all that much. I assumed maybe I'd done some of like Rex's side quest or whatnot. I know I did some of like the worlds, like hopping down onto the world and roaming around and adventuring. That's mostly because I was just lost, because a lot of times when you go into a galaxy, sometimes it'll be very straightforward and point you in the direction, but like at least when you're trying to find Liara, it doesn't really tell you which planet she's specifically on, so you can end up a little bit lost. And I believe when I first played it, I got very unlucky, and I explored like a couple of worlds before figuring out which way it pointed me. But we'll set that aside. So how long did it take me to finish the Legendary Edition version of the game? It only took me about 14, 15-ish hours. Not bad. And I feel very good with the time overall. So what are some of the other theories as to why it took me so long? Especially since it looks like I actually did less for the original game than I did on the remake. My best guess is me just being a bit of an idiot. See, when I played games back then, a lot of the time I would set them down for long periods of time. I still do. But what would end up happening is when I went to pick it up, I would be completely lost as to where I was. In fact, for the challenge, I had a similar-ish feeling with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Even though I was at pretty much the very beginning of the game, I kind of dropped in and I was like, where the fuck am I? I settled in, But the issue with Mass Effect is it's an RPG. Well, it's a light RPG, I guess you could call it, where you run around and you could be in the middle of a side quest. You could be in the middle of a world somewhere in the middle of in the middle of the galaxy, in the middle of a system that you're not supposed to be in. So I have a feeling that a lot of the time attributed to my playthrough there is partially me loading up the game and just standing around, as I am one to do sometimes. I've done that before, where I just loaded up a game, intent on playing it, and then I sit there with the game just running for hours. It's part of the reason that my Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky time is like 150 hours, is because there would be a lot of times where I intend to play the game, but then I get distracted with something else. So that could be part of it, because I did have a setup at the time where like my computer and my PlayStation and everything were together in one place. So a lot of times I would be watching a video on my PlayStation while I had a game running on my computer, or vice versa. And it ended up being a bit of a mess that probably contributed to a bit of runtime. But besides that, there is the time to resume, I guess. When you drop into a game you haven't played in a long time, and there's a certain amount of time that it takes before you get a grasp of what you were doing, the controls, your objectives, and where you are in relation to said objectives, before you fully get a grasp of what you're doing. I wouldn't be surprised if a big chunk of my time was just I was lost on X, Y, or Z, running around for extended periods of time, got annoyed, set it down just for the pattern to kind of refresh the next time I picked it up. It happens a lot more than you would think, actually, where I just pick up a game and I run around, and because I'm kind of lost and the objective isn't fully clear sometimes, I just end up getting frustrated, putting it down, and then coming back to it another time. The two places I could see this happening the most, especially the last time I remember picking up the game, are on... what's the planet called? One second. On Noveria, when you have to go running back and forth across an office block. That gets a bit annoying. And that specifically, Noveria, is where I remember last picking up the game, when I was running through the fucking labs. Luckily, I was able to get through it, fumbling, I guess, but yeah. And then the other one is the Citadel, because on the Citadel there is a lot of kind of running back and forth and around whatnot that you can easily get lost if you don't pay attention, or if you set down the game for many months and then don't pick it up for a long time. Yeah. So that's probably where a good chunk of the time was spent, sadly. But yeah, so that's the PS3 version. I was very surprised with where I was. So from where I was in the PS3 version, which was pretty much like right at the end, all I had to do was do the assault, and then you enter the finale where you go back to the Citadel, then go to Ios, and then finish the game. So, yeah, I was only like maybe an hour or two away from the end of the game. But I set it down because I think part of it is a lot of times when I'm playing games, if I can sense that we're at the precipice of a build-up. In fact, it happens with a lot of things that I consume. Movies, books, TV shows, video games. A lot of times, if I sense like too much anticipation kind of building, like when a finale's coming up, I get the sudden urge to stop and kind of prepare myself. I know it's a bit silly, but that's kind of what I end up doing for some reason. I do a lot of the time just kind of sit and wait in anticipation for something, hoping, I guess. Or, I don't know. I think it's because I want to savor the finale most of the time. Because, sometimes with the finale, it's either a really long run-up or it's a very fast run-up. It's hard to tell sometimes without looking up a guide or looking at things. Oh, that's another thing that might have contributed to the time. It was a time when I wasn't fully willing to look at guides to see exactly how far I had left or exactly what the critical path was. So, whoops. But yeah, so I think, I sensed we were leading up to the end of the game, so I set it down. Because I didn't know how long the assault would take, and, how much more was there beyond that. And I wanted to make sure I had enough time and, I guess, emotional fortitude to tackle the task. But I never got around to it. It's partially because it's on my PS3, and I don't play my PS3 all that often, unless it's for very specific reasons, like, to finish a game that's on it. But then when Mass Effect Legendary Edition came out, it pretty much signed the death warrant for me finishing the campaign. I will probably eventually get back around to it, and I'll maybe do a bunch more side quests and whatnot. But otherwise, it's kind of on pause for a long time. Because there's very few games left on my PlayStation that I actually play. The main one that I still kind of hang around for is Final Fantasy IX. Well, that's a PS1 game. Because my main save for Final Fantasy IX is trapped on my PS3. Otherwise, I would have transferred it over to my PS1 ages ago. But, yeah, so I'm trying to work my way through Final Fantasy IX on my PS3, but that's also technically got to wait, at least a little bit. But, yeah. So, Mass Effect Legendary Edition. How did it overall go for me? Pretty good. So, I had just started the game, luckily, and had gone through the prologue and was hanging out at the Citadel. I wasn't entirely sure where I was on the Citadel mission, but I was pretty much at the very beginning. Basically, I hadn't gone to try and expose Saren the first time yet. So I had literally just done the prologue and was hanging out in the ambassador's office doing nothing. And that's where I stopped. And that was because, similar to the setting it down because the end of the game is full of, I don't know how long it's going to be and whatnot. I had the whole game ahead of me this time. So I was like, I'm not ready to fully tackle this yet. I got my toes in, and I'll tackle it in good time. Fast forward about a year or two, and I decided to do the challenge so that I can actually get through these games that I set down and just let hibernate indefinitely. And this is probably one of the first games that I finally tackled and finished properly. I mean, yes, I did kind of rush through it, but I was surprisingly able to go with the flow a lot more than I thought I would be able to in the game, because, in the PS3 version, I believe I accidentally or intentionally, I can't remember, slaughtered everyone on Pharos. But in this, I was able to only accidentally kill 2 people, and I was able to get their entire thing up and running. They were doing fantastic. Yeah, I was still kind of rushing through. I even was able to, I believe, help out a lot of people on Novaria when I got around to it. But yeah, I didn't do a whole lot. I did maybe a handful of side quests, primarily in the Citadel. I turned down a side quest in Novaria. It was like a little espionage thing that, I was going mostly Paragon, so I didn't do it. But yeah. So real quick, the general plot. Humans are trying to get more recognition within the, galactic alliance that's going on, that hangs out around the Citadel. There's a massive mystery as to the origin of the Citadel. It is believed to have been made by an ancient race of aliens who are long dead, called the Protheans. But they're not entirely sure why it was made or what the purpose was. But a bunch of alien species have kind of come together and made it the centerpiece of a, galactic civilization where many different species of aliens come together to work together to solve problems and help each other kind of expand, while kind of regulating it and trying to minimize, potential impacts of said expansion. You join the humans. Specifically, you control Commander Shepard. who you can choose to be male or female. It doesn't really matter because the name is always Shepherd. The main effect it has is, who you're able to romance, which options in this game I believe are fairly limited anyway. But putting that aside, you helped diminish an attack happening on a human colony called Eden Prime that was orchestrated by a specter named Saren. So you go back to the Citadel to expose Saren for his crimes, but the Council doesn't believe you because, he's their number one good boy. He wouldn't do something like that. So you have to run around the Citadel and get evidence. Now, you can do this in a couple of different ways. Specifically, you can follow the Rex path or the Garrus path. Both of them will suggest recruiting each other so you can have a full party in order to take down a crime boss who is protecting a Quarren that has information on the attack. You go through that. The Quarren is Tali. She has a recording of Saren and Matriarch Benezia talking about the attack. So then you are kind of given the next option of where to go. You can either investigate a Geth attack on Pharos, go see what Matriarch Benezia is doing on the Geth interest on Noveria, or eventually, after you do one of those, you could go to... Well, actually, the actual third option is you can go find Liara, who is Matriarch Benezia's daughter. So, of course, I did that first. Went, found her. Luckily, I didn't do a bunch of different planet hopping to find her. I found her. She says she doesn't know what her mom's up to, but she'd be happy to join us, especially since Saren is likely going to hunt her down to try and kill her for the information that she has, as she is an archaeologist who's been studying the Protheans. You save her. She joins your crew. Then the order of things, you technically should go to Pharos first and then go to Noveria, but I went to Noveria first, and that's just so happens to be where Matriarch Benezia is. So you go through that, kill her. She gives you a bunch of information that Saren's ship is mind controlling a bunch of people, that the longer you're within influence of it, the more susceptible you are to his ideas. And then she gives you the key to stuff, like key information for things, and then she dies. You then can free this ancient species of bug creature named... I can't remember the name of it. It's like... What is it called? It's like it starts with an R. It's like Rapthian or something like that. Basically, they were a species that was accidentally discovered, and they have a hive mind that causes issues as, they couldn't understand any languages that were happening, because they communicate through like music and whatnot, or harmonical tones, and so there was a massive misunderstanding that led to them causing mass destruction across the galaxy as they were just going and colonizing. So the Solarians introduced the Krogan, or the Taurans introduced the Krogan. Basically, they got the Krogan and were like, hey, could you deal with these people? Or these bug guys? And they were like, sure. Went through, wiped them out to extinction, but then they became a bit of an issue. So the Solarians did a genophage, made it to where the Krogan couldn't reproduce, and only like 1 in every 1,000 births actually makes it to term and survives. So a big issue. But yeah, so you can free the last queen of that species. I did, because one, I'm curious to see if it comes up in later games, see if things are happening, and also it just kind of seemed like the right thing to do. Damning a species to extinction isn't exactly a great thing to do. But then I went to Pharos, where there is a major Geth attack going in. You're able to help repel the Geth attack from Zoo's Hope, but there's some issues going on in Zoo's Hope. you can fix them all for them, and then you can just work your way over to the facility. So Zoo's Hope is a facility that, Zoo's Hope is a colony. The entire colony on Pharos is a sponsored colony. Basically, a company will sponsor and pay for a colony to be settled on a planet as long as that colony works for the company in order to turn a profit of sorts. Once that's done, the company's happy and I guess leaves you alone, ? But you go, you find out that the company, because there's a lot of talk that the company hasn't found anything. So everyone's confused as to, why they're letting the colony continue. The colonists themselves, of course, see it as home, even though you could get them out, but they don't want you to. So you go and you find out some shady stuff's going off on the colony. At the company. You go through the company, and you find out that they actually did find something. It's a telepathic plant creature that's over 5,000 years old. The whole thing gives you, after you kill it, the person it had gives you a codex for the message that you got in your mind on Eden Prime. But you're not fully able to decipher it because, one, it's not the full message, and two, boy, it's a lot of information. So, with that and the colony saved, you then go to Vermeer, where you're sent to Vermeer because the forward team, the information team, whatchamacallit, scouting team, I guess you can say, they've had a bit of an issue. They sent out a message, but they weren't able to decipher what the message was, so they're just sending you to see what the message was. And it turns out they were asking for, a full-on assault team and warships and whatnot to help take on this base. But it looks like you just got us. Turns out that Saren has been developing a cure for the genophage so that he can have a Krogan army alongside his Geth army in order to, do stuff. That's where you have to talk Rex down because he obviously doesn't want you to destroy the cure for the genophage. So, and you can either talk him down or he ends up dying. But anywho, you assault the base, fight Saren once, get him mostly dead, but then he leaves. You can try to talk him out of it, but he doesn't quite go through. Then you go to Eos, where you learn everything after you've been locked down and you have to make an escape. It's a very small part. But you go to Eos, and there's a big revelations and whatnot that no, the Proteans didn't make the stuff. In fact, the Reapers made the stuff, and you kind of learned this on Vermeer as well. But no, the Proteans, just like the Asari, just kind of found the Citadel and set up. The Keepers around the Citadel are supposed to activate the Citadel. The Citadel is actually a big mass relay that brings the Reapers in from dark space into the center of the galaxy in order to cause mass destruction. So, yeah, you defeat Saren, defeat the Reaper, what's its name? Sovereign, and success. You can assign one of the two humans to the council if you saved the council, and then game over. And then you can transfer the save over to Mass Effect 2. Though there's a contrived reason for you to be able to re-customize your character if you want to. But yeah, so that's the Mass Effect story. Quick rundown. Now, like I said, I didn't do a whole lot of the side stuff. Specifically, the two missions I definitely did not do were the ones, like the companion missions for Rex, which was to retrieve his armor from a collector, and the one for Garrus, as he is trying to track down a maniacal doctor who was selling cloned organs on the black market. So, I didn't do those because, one, I felt that they were going to, shift my alignment a bit. It's very fuzzy as to like how it affects things. But yeah, the character that I romanced for this playthrough was, of course, Liara. And I'm going to try my best. I know that technically she is not really romanceable in the second game, but supposedly through DLC she is. It's just you have to find the very specific like thread to follow to be able to kind of re-romance her. But yeah. Oh well. So yeah, I had a very fun time playing this game. The gameplay is, over the shoulder shooting and whatnot. My favorite weapon was this sniper rifle because it's very fun to just delete an enemy from all the way across the battlefield. It's a very fun experience. Yeah, the Legendary Edition has a setting that I believe I had turned on where the normal 60 level range is compressed down to a 30 level range. And that might be part of what helped speed up my time, is that I was gaining levels a lot faster, essentially. And I was able to put points in a lot more, at least a lot more quickly. And that really helped speed things up. Yeah, I mean, I liked the sci-fi world. You really do get kind of engrossed in the world as you're learning the history of the Protheans and the Citadel and just what happened, as well as the other elements of the history, like I think they're like Rathians or something like that. Again, I can't fully remember the name, but that whole war and whatnot, and the fact that there was a potential to, alleviate the genophage, but, you kind of had to stop Saren. I believe that there is another opportunity to reverse the genophage that's presented in later games. I don't know which one, though. It could either be Mass Effect 2 or Mass Effect 3. I'm not sure. I do know that when I do eventually play Mass Effect 2, which I will, of course, try to do for the challenge, I'm going to have a tough time of it because, one, there's a ton of DLC to play. Two, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do to ensure your crew survives. Because the whole, end of the game is called, the suicide mission. And if you don't go around, helping everyone out, they die during the suicide mission. So I have to see what I want to do before I actually start tackling Mass Effect 2. It's going to be a journey. But, yes, there's a journey that I will have to tackle down the line. Of course, I do also know that supposedly the ending of Mass Effect 3 is not all that great, but it should be fine in the end, I think. Because I if I remember correctly, they kind of tweaked the ending when DLC came out. I can't remember. But yeah, I'll try to do Mass Effect 2 and 3 and Andromeda for the challenge. But I'll, of course, space them out a bit so I have a bit of time. And that way I can also do some research as to what paths and routes I want to take through Mass Effect 2 and 3. But that's for future me to worry about. Right now, I have more games to play besides that. After I finished Mass Effect on the challenge, I decided that I was going to do Shadow of the Tomb Raider, another game that I've just kind of had sitting around that I wanted to get done. But I also found that it surprisingly, for some reason, frustrates the hell out of me, on a story level as well as some other things. But yeah, so I decided to set that on the back burner and just play a bit of a cozy game. I have a bit of a stressful and annoying weekend/week ahead of me after this, so why not go ahead and just play something cozy? So for the challenge, I played Unpacking, a very cute, lighthearted, simple game that only takes about an hour and 3.5 hours, to finish, and I do highly recommend it. So I did a kind of shortish episode on that, and for next week, or this week when this episode comes out, I will be doing Minecraft Dungeons and Minecraft Legends, both of those games for this week. Then I'll get around to not Mass Effect, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and just push through and finish it. But yeah, it's a thing. But what am I doing for Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy, you might be asking? I don't know, to be honest. Basically, as it relates to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy, at this moment, I'm a little bit rudderless. I do have some things that I can do, things I've set up, to watch ages ago that I haven't really touched, or things that I planned on talking about ages ago that I haven't touched. But at this moment, I currently don't have a solid plan for what I plan on doing next. I should probably do something fantasy, though, shouldn't I? That's always the thing I end up the conclusion I end up coming to every so often is, man, I've been doing a bunch of X. I should really add in a couple of Y, I've been doing a ton of sci-fi stuff. I should really do some more fantasy stuff. And of course, I did just do Treasure Island, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then Treasure Island, the movie, and Treasure Planet. So, things. But what could I do? What should I do? Who knows? Because I do have some things kind of lined up over there. Like maybe I'll do the 100-year-old man who climbed out a window and disappeared and discuss that. Or I could finish the book I'm reading currently and discuss it. That might be interesting. It's a fantasy novel. We'll see. We'll see just how much progress I make on certain things. And then if I finish something and I'm quite happy with it, I'll talk about it. As for the next video game I'll do for this channel, I'm not entirely sure. It kind of depends on the video games that I play for the challenge, honestly. It won't be Shadow of the Tomb Raider, because I kind of want to do all the Tomb Raiders together, like maybe back to back, like how I like to do for some reason, where I just do a bunch of the same similar thing back to back for a period of time. But I do like to have good stretches of time where I don't do that. So we'll see what I end up doing. Like right now, if I end up doing one of the games I have listed up, like as the games I'm investigating on whether or not I want to play them next, I might do an episode on that if I get around to it. But otherwise, yeah, look forward to next week. It could be very interesting as to what I end up picking. It could be very interesting as to what I end up picking. But with that said, we'll go ahead and wrap up things here. So if you guys liked this and you were watching/listening to it on YouTube, feel free to give it a like, comment, subscribe, or if you were listening to it on any podcast catcher of your choice, feel free to rate, review, follow, share it with your friends, and feel free to also check out the challenge on RPG Hangout that you can listen to on any podcast catcher of your choice, where if you want to listen to me talk about other games, specifically, I guess, 5 weeks of Final Fantasy VII for a bit, but you want to hear the games that I'll probably end up covering on Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy eventually, but you want to hear me talk about it there first, or games that I probably won't ever talk about on Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy, feel free to check it out over there, because I am playing other stuff like Cat Quest and shit like that that I probably won't ever really talk about on Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. So if you want to hear me talk about those kinds of games, and other games as well, like games that I probably won't get around to talking about on Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy for years, yeah, go ahead and check out what I'm doing over there. Anyway, thank you guys once again for listening. I will talk to you guys next week. Goodbye.